Today, on episode 137 of the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, we got Maureen Metcalf on the show, and she's going to talk to you about how improving yourself will actually improve others around you. That's right, folks. It's all about how to innovate your leadership skills today. Are you ready for this? All right, let's do it.
Welcome to this episode of Moving Forward Leadership. Stick around and learn how to achieve, excel, and become a leader that people willingly follow. Lead, don't boss. And now, here's the host of our show, Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy.
Yes, welcome one, welcome all to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. It is your Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy, and welcome to the podcast where we focus on the three domains of leadership, and that is leading yourself so that you can be the best leader possible, leading your team so that you can build those teams to become high-performing teams, which we all seek, and then finally, leading your organization so that you can increase your organizational output, whatever that is. And here at Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, we couple my 20 years of experience as a senior Canadian Army officer and put it together with world-class guests such as Maureen today and bring you what I consider to be the best podcast on leadership going. And if you want more, then check out our ecosystem over at movingforwardleadership.com. And today's show notes is actually giving me how is that movingforwardleadership.com/137. All right, today we're going to be talking about how to innovate your leadership skills. Why? Because you need to be continually improving. You need to be pushing your limits. The moment you stop learning is the moment you become useless to your organization and your team. So it's so crucial that we continually to innovate, learn, and just improve. And hence the moving forward aspect of moving forward leadership, inspired by the Japanese term Kaizen, continuous improvement. And that's what we're talking about today, folks, continuously improving yourself. And we bring in Maureen. Why? Because she is the founder and CEO of Innovative Leadership Institute, which is a highly sought after organization anticipating and leveraging future business trends. She helps leaders elevate their quality of leadership and transform their organization to create sustainable impact and results. She's got 30 years of experience. She's award-winning author, and they're being used basically in public, private, and academic, worldwide, essentially. And she is a fellow of the International Leadership Association. So you know she knows what she's talking about. She is a world-class guest, and that's the reason why she's here. And you know what? Let's do this. So why don't you sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Maureen Metcalf on how you can innovate your leadership skills. Maureen, welcome to the show. It's so great to have you here tonight.
Thank you, Scott. I'm delighted to be able to join you today.
Awesome. So one of the things I like to do at my show is with the guests, right off the bat, get them to give a little bit about background about themselves, who they are, where they come from, how you got to where you are today, just so the listener has an understanding, of who you, Maureen Metcalf, is. And the reality is what I'm trying to do is basically get you to give it your street cred, right? So that establish yourself as an expert in your domain. So why don't we start there, and then we'll dive into deeper topics.
Okay, so street cred is I founded, own, and run an organization called the Innovative Leadership Institute. I have been doing this for almost 20 years. Before that, I worked for PricewaterhouseCoopers and Accenture, so large consulting firms, for about 12 years. And before that, I was in the computer industry. I've written 9 books, each winning international book awards for things like Best Business Reference Books. So you will not be taking those to the beach with you mostly. I write for Forbes, I also host a podcast with over 250 interviews now. So my expertise is focusing on helping leaders innovate or update how they lead. And we are now, having been in the COVID crisis, along with several other disruptions for about 5 months now, the idea that we need to innovate or update how we lead should not be a new idea. What we've seen, I think, for many leaders that were incredibly effective pre-crisis is they are not necessarily as good in a crisis as they were in a relatively normal setting. And so this idea of innovating or updating how you lead really applies to helping leaders continue to elevate their skills to meet the challenges we're facing in our world right now.
9 books. Holy smokes. That's a lot of writing. And not to mention Forbes and 250 interviews. Well done.
Thank you.
For me, I haven't actually counted the number of interviews, but I'm getting close to 100 interviews. This is going to be episode 137. So yeah, I'm definitely close to 100 interviews. And that's maybe something I should do someday, is count them up to see who's going to interview 100. But I can tell you that's a lot of work. So well done to you. A lot of great accomplishments in there. And I find it interesting, the ideology of being, innovative and updating our leadership skills. So first off, what does that even look like? What does that mean to the leader who's listening here, who's like, well, I am who I am. I am a leader. I have my skill sets. What do you mean innovating me?
So think about how often, most of the leaders I know work crazy long hours, right? So we are spending all of our time running our organizations and transforming the organization. So say I run a technology organization, I keep current on the technology. I understand my field within the company. So say I'm in insurance, I have to understand what's happening in the insurance field. If I'm a CIO, I have to understand what's happening in technology, in insurance and technology overall. So most leaders think they're staying current because they're staying current in the ecosystem, in the industry, in the functional area, but they're not necessarily staying current also in the field of leadership. And as leaders, we are the vehicle of doing the leading, and yet most people in leadership roles don't invest sufficient time to stay current as leaders. They stay current in their field. And I think there's a significant difference, especially as we're learning things like neuroscience and how do people stay engaged and all of these things that are often considered soft things. But imagine employees who are disengaged are, in some cases, 50% less productive. By engaging your people, you get to double your productivity. Now that's a poor case, but we've all seen situations where somebody isn't engaged. If I can change how I lead, now there are also people who are just disengaged. They're in the wrong job. But if as a leader, I can update, not to say what I was doing is bad, but if I can continue to refine how I'm leading, then and improve productivity dramatically, my life is better. The organization is more effective. The employees that work with me are more effective. All of our stakeholders receive a better output. So that's kind of the business case for what does updating actually even mean? Because I don't know anyone who says I'm out of date. I don't know anyone who says I'm not working hard enough yet, right? So those aren't the case. But often people don't think about their personal leadership skills depreciate just like their mobile devices. And I'm not working with anyone who uses a flip phone.
You should come and work for D&D. Occasionally still get a flip phone or the old school cell phones. Solid joke. Now, definitely agree with you. And the part I found interesting was no one looks at themselves and goes, "Oh, I'm out of date." But the reality is we need to continuously learn. And I say this all the time to the listenership that The moment that we stop learning is the moment we become useless to our organization for so many reasons, whether that is being, losing ground on the tech side and understanding the markets or the business that you're in, your competition, et cetera, losing ground and understanding the new generation that's entering the workforce and coming underneath your control as a leader, and everything else in between. We need to continuously learn. So I really like this message that you're putting out there. Now, for the leader that's listening here, what's the first steps of, basically, would it be like a self-analysis, like, where am I failing, where am I good type thing, or how does that go?
So I start with vision and values. Who do I want to, what do I want to accomplish, and who do I want to be in that process? So not only I want to make a significant, so for me, I want to make a significant contribution in the field of leadership. Doesn't matter what country your listeners are from. Most of us, especially during the COVID crisis, but also political environment disrupted, social justice challenges. Most of us are facing a range of challenges in our world. And if we aren't clear on both what we want to contribute to the world and who we want to be in that process, then it's hard to know where to focus. And then the second step is strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So what am I good at? And how will that help me accomplish my mission? What am I not as good at that I really need to address? And are there any serious threats?
So it's really like a business case, right? You look at the goals of the organization, the mission, the vision of organization. Okay, we're here. We want to go there. We do our SWOT analysis. I feel like I'm back in my days of doing my MBA at nighttime again. And we do our SWOT analysis and figure out, what am I good at? What am I not good at? So here's the question that I'm really interested to hear your take on. In my world as a senior Army officer, we focus on having people rounded. And what I mean by that is when we do the SWOT analysis and we identify weaknesses of ourselves and our subordinates, we want our subordinates to work on those weaknesses so that they're no longer weaknesses. However, I've heard so many people out there say, you know what? There's no time for that. Double down on your strengths and bring people in whose strengths are your weaknesses. So I really would like to know what your thoughts are with that kind of, basically debate.
So what we say in writing is focus on your strengths 80%, focus on your weaknesses 20%. And we say nicely opportunities, not weaknesses. But it's the stuff you don't do well. So let me give the example in my life. To grow a business, I needed to be able to do public speaking. I needed to write. Writing was not a strength. Someone invited me to write a humor column at one point, and they told me I wasn't funny after a while, and I got canned. It was free. I was doing it for free anyway. Certainly I cannot be a comedian. This I know. The first time I was paid to speak at a conference, my audio went out, and I'm pretty introverted. I was pleased that it went out, or at least relieved. People started to leave. I didn't understand why they didn't all leave. That sense that I want everyone to not listen to me makes me a really poor public speaker. I couldn't do well teaching in a university when I was hiding behind the podium. Right? I had to build that skill. I couldn't bring someone in to do it for me. It's my job as the CEO and founder to be in front of people and having these conversations. And if I'm afraid of you, I can't do that. So there are times that we need to, whatever phrase you use, for dudes, man up, for women, pull up the big girl panties. And I know that's not politically correct, but there are times you have to get over the discomfort, figure out how to move forward, and build the skills. Now, certainly, I would not go into a motivational speaker job because I don't think I will ever be brilliant at speaking. But for informational conferences, I'm actually good because I know my content and I can engage people and I care that they walk away with good information. So I think there's a balance. In the Army, there may be times that you can bring in people to augment your weaknesses, but it's never a perfect fit. It's not a lock and key, right? You bring in somebody who augments something, but they're missing something. And they've got a superpower in something else. So we're talking about human beings, not widgets. I don't think it's ever as simple as the formula we hear. So I think there's always some development. And even if I'm good at my current role, to get to the next role, there's a bunch of stuff I'm not ready for.
Very, very valid points, I would say. I think probably the biggest takeaway there is the identification of the things that you must do, right? Like you said, you must be able to be the one that's out there speaking. You must be the one that's giving this content out. You must be that person. So if the skills required to achieve those things are not necessarily your strong suits, then you're the one that you have to working on building those skill sets so that you can bring that towards your team, your organization, what have you, right? However, at the same point, you have a website, I have a website. If our skill's not web dev, is that something that you have to bring? No. So that's when you bring someone in, whether that's contracting out or bringing someone in your team and stuff like that to round your skills out so that you achieve what you want to achieve. That fair?
I have a brilliant team of people around me. They do everything I'm not good at. And I'm incredibly fortunate. I could not be doing what I'm doing if I had to do all the web dev, if I had to do all the social media management, if I had to manage the finances. I have a degree in finance and I can't manage my stuff. I don't like it. I could if I had to, but I find I wait until I'm tired at night and then I miss the details. I mean, there's just stuff that, so kind of back to the earlier point, there are things I have to do. And I need to build the skills. There's stuff I don't have to do, and I don't. Even if I have the skills, I may just not like them. And I have someone on my team who is brilliant at the stuff I don't do or don't do well. And we have a nice segregation of duties.
I like it. I like it a lot. So we talked about the first steps, which is, talking about our core values, talking about our vision for ourselves as a leader, and then we sit and do our SWOT analysis. We determine what our strengths are, weaknesses are, the opportunities, the threats, and all this stuff. And we do that analysis. So in order to be innovative, what's next? Because someone can easily dive into analysis paralysis and get there. So what should they be looking to going to next?
So think about, I know where I want to be, I know where I am. Basic gap analysis, right? That's what the SWOT gives me. Is I know what the gap is. Now I build my plan and I time phase it. So this is where humility comes in, being a comprehensive thinker, those kinds of things. I need to assess myself reasonably, prioritize which weaknesses I need to address. I need to figure out what of the towering strengths I want to get better at so that I can get to the next level. So it's not just about closing the gap. So using my public speaking thing, I went to improv classes as an example. I am much more comfortable in front of an audience. That's probably in the good enough bucket. And then there's something else I'm working on, like learning how to host radio shows. When I started, I was terrible. I think even my family, my dad listened and he's like, I counted 45 ums in the first 10 minutes, then I had to turn you off. There's always a next thing that we're getting good at. We get good enough at that and we figure out if we want to continue to grow or dump it in the good enough bucket and pick up the next one. So it's, again, like you did in your MBA class, you build a transformation plan. The only difference is I'm transforming myself. And frankly, as I transform myself, and this is something we don't often talk about, I am impacting everyone around me. So let's use the example of a client who wants to be better at better not micromanaging his team. Well, his team is kind of used to letting him do the work because he's so annoying as a micromanager. He can't get better at that until they also start doing their jobs, which they would have done had he not continued to redo their work. So there's also the dance as a leader specifically. As I change, my changes have to ripple through the organization. So there's a change self, and then both looking for input from stakeholders, but also I'm thinking almost of the image of dancing. If you're leading me in a dance, you step back, I have to step back, or I'm an ineffective dance partner if it's a close dance.
That is awesome. I love the example of the micromanager. One of the things that I'm a huge fan of is delegation, and obviously that's completely inverse to micromanagers. However, like you said, it's the second order effects, right? If I do great delegation, what happens? Well, I build the knowledge sets of my subordinates. I empower them. I build them up. I enable them to learn aspects of my job so that eventually someone's going to be ready to replace me at one point, at one day, because I'm not going to stay in this role forever. At some point, I'm leaving, regardless if I'm the CEO of a Fortune 500 company or I'm my own business owner. I'm going to leave my organization someday. So if I can delegate, build people up, prepare them, give them the skill sets, someone's going to be ready to replace me at the end of the day. And I love that example.
Well, and so as a military officer, I don't know all militaries, but do you rotate every couple of 2 or 3 years? So you have to make sure people are ready when you exit.
Absolutely. I always say that if we don't prepare others to take over from us, then everything I've done in those 2 to 3 years goes down the toilet. It leaves with me. And it's not like, oh, I need to leave a legacy. No, I just need to leave things in place. So, and people knowledgeable and empowered enough to take what I've started and continue to run with it.
Yeah.
One of my last big jobs was I was a squadron commander of 200 soldiers, 200 members of the Canadian Forces, and I spent months working on what we call our handover notes. So basically, all the notes for the incoming person to take them, and then run with the squadron when we did the change command ceremony. And I made sure my second in command was all up to speed. He was basically a carbon copy of me, so he knew everything I knew. He not necessarily thought the same way I did, because I didn't want that, but he was, in my head, carbon copy of my knowledge, and understood the vision for the squadron, understood what we were doing as we move forward on various projects. And it survived. It survived past me for sure.
I talk about one of my colleagues, and while she and I think very differently, I trust any decision she would make. It won't be the same decision I'll make, but it's going to be a good decision. And that's as good as it's going to get. I don't want to brainwash people.
What are your thoughts on having people question decisions as a leader? You make a decision and enabling people to come and say, hey, why did you do that? Or why did you make that decision? Are you crazy or whatnot?
So I'm a big believer in respect. So I don't want anyone to come to me and say, are you crazy?
Yeah.
And I have earned a level of success that I'm not insane. I may make a mistake, and I do that all the time. And there are certainly better ways to do things. And I will afford the same respect to anyone working with me. If you're working with me, I don't hire crazy people. I have dated crazy people, but I don't hire them. Different screening process.
Haven't we all?
So there's a learning and growing, and I definitely want people to understand why I'm making the decisions I'm making. And so I assume you see this in the military all the time. You have more experience than the people working for you, and their inquiry will help them be in your head so they can make those decisions. But I'm also assuming you don't encourage people to treat you disrespectfully.
Oh, no. Yeah, no.
There's a chain of command.
Yeah.
And it's interesting in our current world that is much more collaborative. It's easy to circumvent the chain of command and inadvertently undermine people. So if you work 2 levels above me, and I actually worked in the U.S. Air Force for a while and worked with a general officer. So I was an external consultant. I worked closely with him and then with, the next 3 or 4 levels down. And I had to be very careful not to undermine different people because of my working relationship across levels. I think it's important, especially in organizations that maintain order based on the hierarchy, to respect the way work gets done and why that hierarchy is in place, and not undermine it.
Sometimes you have goals, but you know what? You have a hard time reaching them, and you just can't figure out why. Why is it that you can't achieve those things that you want to achieve? Maybe it's dedication. Maybe it's motivation. Maybe you haven't picked the right goals. So this is where I was not too long ago. And then I realized something. I've been developing the Power Goals program my entire life. And here it is now for you, where you can learn how to pick the right goals, figure out how to achieve those goals, how to stay on track, but most importantly, how to get back on track when you get off. So are you ready? Are ready to up your game and achieve those things that you've been meaning to achieve for so long now? Simply go to movingforwardleadership.com/power and learn more about the Power Goals program and achieve everything that you've been wanting to achieve. And now, back to the show. No, it definitely makes sense. And from my personal example, I enabled a couple people. I said, all right, you have the ability to walk in, shut my door, and go, what the heck are you thinking here? Those being the two people that were closest to me, because I knew that they were in my head so much that they were able to know what I was thinking when I made the decision. So if they walked in, I knew that what they were going to say to me was thought out, right?
I want to just say a word of caution. It was all the vogue to say, I have an open door policy and you can come in and say anything you want. And because of my role as an executive coach, then those people come to me. So I had a CIO I was working with, and he claimed he had an open door policy. And then he'd come into my office and say, why does that guy work here? He sounds like an idiot. Be careful. When, you just said, Scott, that I trust that when they come in and they shut the door, they will have thought out the different implications. They won't just come in hot under the collar or having a complaint that they haven't given due deliberation to. I think we need to encourage people to be thoughtful and then ask the questions. And we as leaders need to be open to, of course, they're not going to understand, because in many cases I have a decade more experience. So I'm supposed to understand more.
The open door policy is an interesting one. In one hand, I like it because it shows transparency as a leader. It shows that willingness, and caring and all those things. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, when you say you have an open door policy, it enables people at the lower levels of the organization to go back to what you said earlier, bypass the chain of command, bring issues up forward without enabling the lower parts of the chain of command to take care of the problem in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to say, okay, so my squadron was divided up in three different troops, a transport troop, a maintenance troop, and a supply troop. And I would tell the troop commanders, like, listen, if it's a problem with trucks, don't care. It's not my problem. If it's a problem with transport only, I really don't care. It's transport's problem. Now, if it's a problem with trucks due to maintenance issues, due to maintenance, either availability of spare parts, availability of personnel, prioritization, etc., now it becomes my problem because it's 2/3 of my organization. It's out of the control of one single troop commander, because the maintenance troop commanders dealing with what they have to deal with their priorities and their resources, etc. The transport one is dealing with their priorities and their resources, and to work together, they're butting heads because there's a conflict there, and ultimately it's up to me to make that decision. And that's what I would always say to people. So yes, I totally agree with you. Open door policy can be good, but at the same time, you need to let the other people do their freaking jobs.
And it is disrespectful for me as a leader to assume I have to go solve that problem. I take away the opportunity for my people to do exactly that, to learn and grow and do their work. Mm-hmm. So it is delicate because if I say I have an open door policy, I have to do that, but it is not necessarily, doesn't necessarily mean you come to me and I fix it for you. Exactly. I then recommend what's the right course of action, including going back to your boss.
No, exactly. So we kind of did a whole whirlwind of different topics here, and I kind of would like to roll back to the self-innovation, innovating yourself. And not to say none of this has been great; it's been fantastic. So we've talked about doing your analysis, doing your gap analysis, and next it was be making the plan of going to where your vision of yourself is as a leader. Where are the common, pitfalls, hookups, hangups, whatever you want to refer to them as, places where people fail in developing themselves? And two, how can leaders avoid it so they don't make the same mistakes?
So the next after I come up with my plan is figure out who's on my team. So again, back to if I'm making a change in my organization, I have to know who's on the team to make sure I succeed. If I'm playing sports, I know who's on my team, who's in the coaching role, who has which role on the team, and how do we know they're successful. As an individual leader, we talked about the team of folks I work with, who, if we're talking about innovating or updating, I should be working with someone who is more innovative than I am. And when I say working with, certainly I, as a coach and an author and those things, a teacher, I work with people, but there are ways to get, quote, mentoring from people who've never met me. So people may get mentoring from you by listening to your podcast. You may be part of their team, even though they don't have the money to come engage you. So figure out who's on your team, what resources you need. I encourage people to have learning partners. So who's my accountability partner, and who's maybe a half a step ahead of me, who mentors me. So those different roles, and then we look at putting our plan into action. So engage in my development. And one of the things I think is interesting is as we start the process, I may think a certain activity is required. Once I get into it, I may decide I'm not willing to do the work to get to that goal. Maybe that's just not something I want as much as is required, or something different is required. Especially right now as things are changing so much, I think there are some capabilities that are really foundational, and that's the agility to know when to pivot and also know when to stay the course. Having a learning mindset, I need to continually stay open to not only learning activities, but changing my own views right? So we talk about changing leader mindsets. And I think you've said similar words. They're in my head. So it's not just learning how to be a commander externally. It's learning what is the heart and the head of the commander really like. Because I can't lead effectively without having a level of compassion and care about the people I work with. I don't learn that from a textbook. I learned that from experience. So I think it is one of the things I hear often is this takes way more work than I wanted to give. There's no shortcut. You didn't run an organization of 100 soldiers without doing a fair amount of development, I assume.
Yeah, it took a while.
And a lot of work.
Absolutely.
And it's not all while you're, quote, on the clock. It's the hard stuff of being, not that work isn't hard, but, I have taught in an engineering program, and the engineers took my class because there was no math involved. But looking inside of yourself and starting to develop emotions, I think many of them were happy to go back and do math problems. That was easy in a different way than understanding who you are as a human being and looking at your genuine character and where am I falling short in things like integrity and character. That stuff's hard.
Takes a lot of internal questioning, a lot of internal self-reflection, and a lot of time of working. And it's not easy. I can tell you from experience, it's definitely not easy. It takes a lot of time, but most importantly, it takes a lot of dedication to say, no, we're going to see this through, see it through all the humps and bumps, and see this through to the end to figure this out. Because at the end of the day, it impacts, as you said earlier to the beginning of the podcast, it doesn't impact just me. It impacts my team. It impacts those around me. It impacts my organization. And here at Moving Forward Leadership, we focus on 3 domains of leadership, and that is leading yourself, exactly what we're talking about right now. Leading your team, which is, like you said, be that micromanager, figuring out that, hey, I need to stop that, empower my team. So you're leading your team. And then finally, leading your organization. And also, once your team gets empowered, your output goes up, your retention goes up, everything goes up, and your organization is better for it.
And I think you alluded to this, and it just seems to come from your essence, that leadership is an incredible responsibility. People are entrusted in our care, and we're responsible for their growth, their development, their engagement, their livelihoods, their families' livelihoods. In your case, potentially their lives. This is something not to be taken lightly as, oh, it's just the next promotion. I'm leading more people. But as a leader, I have a big responsibility for the care of the people in my circle.
No, absolutely agree. For a while, I was a training officer. I used to train young second lieutenants as transportation officers and bring them in. I would, day one, first briefing when they would show up to the course, and I would say, all right, folks, you have to get in the mindset right now. We do not play for second place. We play for first, because there is no such thing as second place in what we do. Like you said, we have people's lives on the line when we're doing the business, when we're on operations and stuff. And it's interesting you mentioned that, because I also did a presentation to a group of business students, and I mentioned that to them. But I also mentioned it's the same for you, because at the end of the day, I won't go through how I presented it, but at the end of the day, if your organization fails, it falls apart, your people lose their jobs, they lose their livelihoods. They need that income to put food on the table, a roof over their head, take care of their families, take care of themselves.
And all the way back to the beginning, and why does innovating your leadership matter? It's that. For leaders who aren't staying current in this disruptive time, and some organizations, it's not, you can't avoid it right now because of the external context. But some leaders who are ill-equipped, their people are now suffering mightily because they're not ready to lead in a time of disruption. And it is unfortunate for them. It's also unfortunate for those who work for them. And some of these folks who are ill prepared or in senior roles and they get the parachute, and the folks who work for them get unemployment.
Yeah, no, definitely. So with that, what are some of the common trends you see that leaders should be innovating towards today, right now, as we speak? Who knows where we are with this COVID pandemic? I don't even want to bother try to figure out if we're in the middle, the beginning, end, whatever. Mm-hmm. But what are you seeing as a common trend for leaders to innovate towards as a goal right now?
So let me give you a list of 7 behaviors. First is humility. In this point, and you just said it, we don't know where we're going. I have to be focused on doing what's right for my people, not maintaining my image of I always have the answer. Second, this unwavering commitment to right action. We decide what's the right course of action, we go forward, but then we pivot when we need to. So the third is 360-degree thinker. I have to have it. Right now, we're living in the midst of an experiment, a scientific experiment. We don't know what's happening with the virus. In some cases, we're going to learn from autopsies, right? We don't want people to die, and yet we don't have the information. So I have to be seeking information from as many different sources and continually refine my course of action. I have to be intellectually versatile, learning from any place I can get good information. So it used to be enough that I understood my industry and my function. Now I'm looking across a global landscape trying to make decisions. Next is fourth, highly authentic and reflective. I have to be looking inside and outside and share with people not every thought that comes into my head, because no one needs that. But I have to be truthful to the extent that it's reasonable. And when I say reasonable, if I'm feeling like I'm close to having a panic attack, I don't share that. But I do share, I don't know what's coming down the pike. I'm concerned about these things. These are the things we're doing to get there. This is where I need your help. How can I help you in your role? Able to inspire followership. And I'd say also know when to get out of the way and follow. While we talked about hierarchy, in a time where you may have the right answer, my frontline person may have the right answer. I have to be that trustworthy, open, authentic, knowledgeable person. And I have to also have the humility to say, this one's not mine. This is yours, Scott, or whomever is on the team. And then the last is innately collaborative. Again, in a time of complexity, none of us, and mostly none of our organizations, and in some cases, none of our countries can solve this alone. We are better coming together and bringing the best scientists to the fore to identify the best solutions rather than playing one-upsmanship. And I realize that this sounds like I'm living in Pollyanna land. I realize companies are creating vaccines and that's about the profit of their organization. And countries have concerns and there are all kinds of intellectual property rights. And the more we are working at cross purposes, the more people die. So it's an interesting, I want to say paradox that we certainly aren't 100% collaborative and we're not 100% closed box. The more we are able to collaborate, the quicker we come to solutions that benefit the larger whole.
I really like a lot of those, but I definitely want to highlight one that you mentioned, and that is sometimes you just need to get out of the way. And as a leader, you don't have necessarily all the answers. You have the position to make decisions, but you don't necessarily have the answers. For example, I'm not a mechanic. I'm not a finance type. I'm not a heavy haul tractor trailer driver. So if guys are coming to me, girls coming to me, informing me of issues with tasks that we have to do, then I have to take their advice and figure a solution that solves their problem, but at the same time gets the job done. And sometimes, you know what? It's delegating that to someone else. Say, here, you take the lead on this, figure it out, come back if you need time, money, resources. Let me know. And in the end, all I care about is the end result.
And back to people's lives and livelihoods are on the line. And if I don't have the humility to know when to step back, we get a worse outcome.
Absolutely. Maureen, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. It's been fantastic. I'm 100% sure that the listeners out there are going to gain a lot. As we wind down, I got a couple last questions for you. The first being one I asked to all the guests here, moving forward leadership. And that is, according to you, Maureen Metcalf, what makes a great leader?
I just went through the technical characteristics. I think it is someone who is passionate about what they lead and who they lead, and sticking to their values and principles. Yeah.
Can't go wrong with that. That's for sure. And final thing is, how can people find you? How can they follow you? You got 9 books out there, your website, all that, everything you got going on. So feel free to give yourself a shameless plug as you seem fit.
So my commitment to the world is to do what I can to elevate the quality of leadership. And each of us is one individual, so we can do what we can do, right? So my website has a lot of resources, and many of them are free. So starting, the website is www.innovativeleadershipinstitute.com. On the homepage, there's a free assessment for looking at these 7 characteristics of leadership. Where are you now and where do you want to be? So that's starting your SWOT analysis. I will not show up at your door. You'll get 7 emails, one for each of the 7 characteristics that helps you identify ways to build your plan. We do blogs every week. We do radio shows every week. I'm a fellow with the International Leadership Association, so I have the privilege of sharing podcasts from their thought leaders, which is everything from prime ministers to top academics. And some of the top leadership academics in the world we have podcasts with. So it's all free. If you are interested in learning more about the field of leadership, go surf the site, look at the blogs. There's a link to either find me on iTunes or Voice America or Stitcher or wherever you listen to podcasts. Again, my commitment is the world is better with good leaders, however you define good in your field. Take advantage of the free resources, of the books, certainly hire me if you want, but take advantage of everything that's there to do your part to be better in the world, because the world will be better because of you.
Love it. We have such a similar mission. For me, my mission is to rid the world of the quote unquote bosses and turn them into leaders. And with great guests like yourself, I'm achieving that every single day, step by step, inch by inch, but we'll get there one day. Maureen, again, thanks for taking your time out. Thanks for coming on the show and talking to me, but most importantly, the audience member.
Scott, thank you for all that you put into this, because I know how much work is required to do a podcast. I really appreciate your contribution to making the world of leadership and the military, that we are living in a safer and more just world because of you.
Oh, thank you so much. All right, that's all I got for you fine folks today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed the interview. And most importantly, I hope you got something out of it. And if you did, remember, R squared, S squared, right? Rate and review the show so that it gets a little bit noticed, a bit more. But most importantly, I can help more people, because that's what I'm here for. That's what my guests are here for, is to help more people become better leaders and not being bosses, right? So remember that. R squared, rate and review. S, share the show. Share this show with someone who you think can relate to the podcast as a whole and today's topic. And then finally, subscribe. Subscribe so that you never miss another episode. And you can do that via your podcast playing app of choice through movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. And as always, stop bossing and start leading. Take care now.